Hi everyone, and welcome back to the Southerner's Northern Garden. So I wanted to do a little video today. I have taken a little bit of time off. I have spent the time inside because it's been so darn hot. So what I've been doing is working on my home network basically, because when you're a content creator and I am recording really large file sizes, like the 4K that I like to shoot in, it takes a lot of time to move that around the network and to store that. And so since it's been so hot, I worked on some inside IT things because I'm also a huge nerd. Just comes with the territory, I guess. So I've been working on that. But what I wanted to talk to you about today was whether you should trust plant tags from brands or the garden center. Most of those typically come from the brands themselves or the growers. And trust is maybe not the best word, but it's important to evaluate the circumstances in which you're planting a plant along with what the plant tag says. So the first example I'm going to provide, because I've had some people ask me recently, is the 𝗟𝗶𝗸𝗲 hydrangea hedge behind me. So this hedge is looking really great this year, and I actually ordered some supports from Gardener Supply that should be coming in this week to brace these up a little bit. I did talk that they were leaning a little bit after we had a storm a while back. And also, I'm shooting this on July 4th, so if there are fireworks sounds in the background, it's a little closer to sunset because I wanted some reprieve from that heat we're having. But these 𝗟𝗶𝗸𝗲 hydrangeas, if you were to look at the plant tag, when I planted them, it said, you know, they could be planted in up to full sun. Now, I would not recommend that in pretty much any climate. If you're in the south, they definitely will struggle unless you've got water on them consistently. And even if you're in the north, where we've had high humidity this week, and these plants are 4 years old, going on their fourth growing season anyway, or in the middle of their fourth growing season, they still struggled really bad this past week with the heat we had, and exhibited some drooping, which I have not really seen a lot of, because these are planted on the north side of the house. They're pretty protective, except in the evening where they get way more light then. And there was still a lot of drooping. We are in somewhat of a drought stage. We've not had any significant rain in the past at least 2 weeks now. I have actually been doing overhead supplemental watering for some parts of my garden that I haven't been able to get drip into, or that I chose not to put drip in, just because I didn't get around to it earlier enough this year. So would I put arborescens hydrangeas in full sun? Absolutely not. I want to take you down here and show you an arborescens that I have. This also goes for most definitely 𝗟𝗶𝗸𝗲 hydrangeas and 𝗟𝗏 hydrangeas. I would probably also not put those in full sun. And I'll show you some that I planted in full sun because the tag said it could take full sun just last year, and they have struggled severely. Of course, hydrangeas love water, so that's always a consideration you have to take into account. If you can give them enough water and you're willing to give them enough water, they might perform pretty well in full sun, but in some instances that might require watering them twice a day, including, you know, when it's hottest around lunch and then later in the evening to allow them to recuperate. And that's not something that I have my hydrangeas on a separate drip, or that I'm willing to do just to satisfy certain plants in my garden. Before this year, I've not experienced a whole lot of drooping, so this is kind of an unusual circumstance this early in the season with us not having sufficient rainfall like we have in previous years. So let me take you down there and show you those hydrangeas right quick that I'm talking about. So one of those is Ivybelle Spirit 2. This is an arborescens hydrangea similar to the 𝗟𝗏𝗸𝗲, but instead it produces pink blooms. I actually ended up and come through and put a drip emitter, which you can see the line here to this. It was planted last year, but it has struggled severely in this heat and drought we've had. This is pretty much gets full sun. It is kind of not under this willow, it's outside of the protection of the willow. And so it gets sun as it comes over the house all day until it sets. Still getting a little bit of sun now. Of course, the sun is setting, but it has just done really terribly and it looks really bad in this spot. And so I'm going to keep it here and give it another year, see how it performs. But that's one that might need to be moved a little bit to be happier. The willow may grow up and shade it more next year, which could also be a benefit. But I also have one over here called Tough Stuff 𝗂𝗂, and I also would not put any of the Tough Stuff series in full sun. So the Tough Stuff 𝗂𝗂, this is their first full growing season in the ground. I've got something digging in over here pretty bad, but you can see how bad the leaves have just burned. Now these don't have drip to them yet. This is one of the areas of the garden that I added, and only the plants along the edge, like this tree, and those few things have drip on them. And so these don't have access to drip. They're definitely gonna need drip. Now they do get some sprinkler head overspray. So this sprinkler sprays into the bed a little bit, but it's not been enough with the lack of rainfall that we've had to make these hydrangeas happy. So in conclusion, 𝗟𝗶𝗸𝗲, arborescens, and 𝗟𝗶𝗸𝗲 hydrangeas I would not plant in full sun. Even higher levels of part sun may be pushing it. So full sun, just so you know, is 6 to 8 hours of sun. That is not sitting outside sun all day. So the fact that it might be shaded in the morning or shaded in the afternoon can still mean that it's a full sun area. Part sun's more like less than 4 hours, 3 to 4 hours. And then of course shade is 1 to 2 hours. So shade does not mean complete shade. Shade-rated plants still need some type of sunlight, at least through some part of the day, to correctly photosynthesize and grow. They may live in full shade, but they're not going to be happy in full shade. There are a couple more plants I wanted to talk about in this video. One of them is butterfly bushes. And so I spoke to someone at Grandma's Gardens the other day. It just came up randomly in conversation. And he was saying that he was having a lot of issues with the Pugster series of butterfly bushes not returning or dying back really bad for customers. And I said that I experienced the same exact thing last year. So I planted two Pugsters last year. One was white, one was a different color, like a purple, I believe. And my Pugster, both of those that I planted, died completely back to the ground. This is the white one. You can see that it's come back now, but all of this growth is new. I had to cut it down to the ground because it suffered complete dieback. His thought to that was, you know, maybe they're not as hardy as they're rated in our zone. Even though they're rated to be here, they just may not have been trialed great in our area, or, you know, they're just, for some reason, they're not returning back very well. He also said that it could potentially mean that they were pushed really hard by the growers with fertilizers. And then we got them into our gardens. They don't have access to that, you know, daily, weekly fertilizer that they're getting at the growers, and they just don't do good their first winter. But I have also got another butterfly bush that I've had in the ground for several years now. I think this is also probably its 4th growing season, maybe its 3rd, but it also suffered severe dieback this past year. So that seems to me to be an indication that maybe they're not as hardy here in zone 6 as they're being made out to be. So this is amethyst. It's a Pugster series, so it stays really small. It has these beautiful big plumes that it gets on it, but it got cut back quite a bit this late spring because it just did not survive great over winter. The last one that I want to talk about is kind of an anomaly, I think, in the conditions that I've had them growing in, but we'll just have to trial it for a few more years and see how they grow. So if you've been watching my channel, you know I love boxwoods. I have lots of boxwoods in my garden, and the one I'm going to specifically mention is Sprinter in a specific use case. And so Proven Winners has this boxwood called Sprinter. It's an improvement on Winter Gem. And it is one of those boxwoods that is not an English variety, so you don't have to necessarily worry about the smell that some people are concerned about. It's a Japanese or Korean boxwood, I believe. But these are all Sprinter, and they have done incredibly well. And so this is a mixed hedge, actually. I had winter green all around the vegetable garden, and then some years ago, the first year the winter green was in the garden, they died back really bad, and so I've told the story that I moved some of those around that maple down there before. But these are winter green, and these are Sprinters, and they have done really well, much better than the winter green in my garden. So if I was going to recommend boxwood, winter green or sprinter. Now this is not Green Mountain, this is winter green, which is an older variety, or sprinter. I would choose sprinter because they do tend to grow a little faster, and I have not had die off from the sprinter except in this use case. Now this too may be something that's being caused by the way the growers are growing them, but sprinters in containers have not done great for me. I have every one except one that I've had a container has died on me. The growers, if you've noticed at a lot of places these days, especially if you're buying at a big box store, not necessarily a nursery that's growing their own shrubs, they tend to put 2 plants in a container. They do that to bulk up the plant, obviously, so it looks better to the customers. And in some cases, you can divide those, like hydrangeas, when you get them home and have 2 specimens to plant out. In other cases, I don't think it's a great idea, and for this reason. This is a sprinter boxwood that I grew, along with this huge thistle here, in a container for several years. It did not do great in a container in my garden. Every one that I planted in a container, except one, which I'll show you in a minute, has done this. And so if you'll notice down here at the bottom of the plant, if you can see it, there's 2 plants here. That's why one of them's green and one of them's not. And so one of the plants has completely died off, and this is the front one here, and I just need to come through and cut this out. Now this will look really, really bad, but it will fill out this side of the boxwood. It may take a little while to do that, but after it does that, it will be okay, and then it can be trimmed up nicely. But sprinter boxwoods in containers, at least for me in zone 6, I would not recommend. And I only have one left that's in a container that's looking really great, and I might transition that one into the landscape this fall just so it doesn't die off. The one that I have up here are just shaped as balls, and so I have this one right here, which is the one that has survived best for me. It's been in this container 2+ years. This one over here is doing the same exact thing. Half of it died. The other plant down here looks completely fine. So I need to be cutting this out here soon. Recently I was leaving it for this video. I will probably transition this one to the landscape as well, somewhere where I need some evergreen interest. In conclusion, what I would say is go to your local garden center and look at the varieties that they're growing. That's not something that I necessarily do because I'm okay at this point in my garden with some plant loss. I like to trial new varieties basically in my garden, so a lot of new varieties don't come out immediately at local garden centers, and so I buy them online. And some varieties you might find at the big box store, but you may not find at your local garden centers. And that's because your local garden centers typically know what grows best in your area, and they're ordering those things that work best and know they work good, so they're not providing product to customers that won't perform well, because typically they offer plant guarantees and they don't want to be selling something that they have to cash in on a guarantee on. And so that's what I would recommend first of all, is grow things that your local garden center sells. Now if you're fine growing things that they don't sell and ordering online, just know that even though the plant tag says it can grow in certain conditions, it may not do well in those conditions. Boxwood specifically, actually growing any perennial or shrub in a container should typically be grown, a plant should typically be hardy 2 zones below what zone you are. So in my case, I would want to pick a boxwood that was hardy to zone 4 because I live in zone 6. Sprinters on their tag are only listed to zone 5. We have not had an actual zone 6 winter for the past several winters here. We've typically been around zone 7. And so even though those are in thick concrete containers that are pretty protected from the wind, being kind of protected by this wall here, they still, one of them died out over winter. So it's just something that you deal with as a gardener, obviously. But I just wanted to make a video about it because I've had some questions recently about, you know, planting things in full sun, or will these things perform well in full sun? And so just realize what your growing conditions are. A lot of these plants that are grown and marketed are also trialed all across the country. But full sun in my Zone 6 Ohio is definitely not full sun in Zone 7 or 8 Alabama. The conditions are somewhat similar as far as the heat goes. The winter conditions are nowhere near the same. So just be cognizant of that and realize that you may be planting something that you need to give a little more protection based on your individualized climate. While I had you guys, I wanted to show you some blooms from my Impressionist rose. I have been growing this one. It's a sport from Heirloom Roses. I believe the parent is Distant Drums, which is a beautiful rose. And it struggled a little bit in the spring. We got immediately super hot weather, kind of not traditionally cooler weather up into June. And so it struggled a lot. And then it got a lot of direct water impact from the sprinkler system. And so a lot of the new growth completely died off, unfortunately. But it has put on a ton of beautiful new growth. Now, the one that I have under the 𝗟𝗂𝗲, and so I have it planted on both sides of this arch here. The one on this side, which is under the 𝗟𝗂𝗲, is not doing as well because it doesn't get enough sun. I never came through and trimmed out my 𝗟𝗂𝗲, but I had several viewers comment that I should cut out the flimsiest growth or the oldest growth. And so what I'm going to come through is cut out the ones that are falling really poorly and leave the ones that are really upright. But the other one under here still looks good, even though it hasn't had, you know, a ton of light. It's just got a few branches. But the one that's over here in full sun is doing really, really well. And it's actually to the point where I might be able to start training it toward this trellis. But check out these blooms. Really, really wonderful. This is the colors I was looking for. And so it ages out to this little pinker color, comes out more orange, pink coral. So this is a climbing rose. So eventually it will cover, you know, this arbor in a couple years, hopefully, after it gets its first year of growing in. As you know, I've been fighting nut sedge terribly, and I've come through and hand pulled a lot of it. This time of year when I'm trying to water a lot, it is more prevalent because it loves wet conditions. I did end up getting my first blooms from my dahlias. I've got a few here that are looking really, really nice. This is a beautiful yellow, and I'm not sure what color, which one that is. And here's a white over here that's looking good. They're just really starting to come into bloom now that it's July. I am not probably going to be shooting my garden tour this week like I had hoped because it has been so hot and the garden is struggling so much. I obviously want that to be a really nice video because so many people watch it, and the circumstances with the weather have just not cooperated. And so there's still a lot of deadheading I need to do. I'm going to try to get what I can accomplish this week. Hopefully we will get some rain this week. It looks like there may be some on the forecast, but if we could get a couple long days of rain, slow rain to really soak into the ground and feed these plants, that would be preferable. And then I can get out here and clean some things up before I give that long presentation. But thank you guys for sticking around, and remember, in a world full of hate, be a light. Take care, everyone.